Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to Liberate. I have Hetal and Nish here from Ranga. Please, we can take a moment to introduce yourself and why being part of Liberate 2021 is important for you. Hetal.
Thank you so much, Monica, for inviting us. We believe that it's extremely critical and important that in today's world that we focus a lot on helping organizations and individuals to really focus around how can we be more digital friendly, as well as taking a look at how we develop tools, resources, technologies, and make it more accessible. So more or less make it global, digital, accessible, friendly, right? So my name is Hetal Parikh, as you mentioned, co-founder of Rangam Consultants, and we're very passionate about being inclusive and creating an inclusive workplace and in a workforce for people with disability and autism.
Thank you for sharing that. And Nish, tell me a little bit more why that's important for you.
Yeah, it is very important because everyone, what we have experienced and seen, that every one of us is connected to someone with disability, visible or invisible disability. In United States, 1 out of 5 individual has visible or invisible disability. Only 3 out of 10 are employed. So it's a huge societal challenge. And when it comes to neurodiversity, it's almost 25% of the population is neurodivergent, and only 50% of them are, this is after 50% of them are truly diagnosed. So it's a challenge. Now the question is, how do we leverage technology and how do we build, as Hetal said, inclusive environment and community at workplace, so people with disability, they are given an equal opportunity, equal equity point of view, to grow and thrive at the workplace. And that is Rangam's mission. And that's why it is very important to participate and have this kind of a conversation and come up with some innovative ideas and solutions which society needs.
Thank you for sharing that. And Hetal, going back to you, what are some ideas that you feel like should exist, but it's not happening?
So, there are oftentimes when we think about certain things that seem trivial, right, for us, it may not be so trivial. And so how we develop applications, and I'm going to speak more on the technology side, right? And then when we look at workforce development, when we look at recruiting models, and when we look at how we're sourcing, how are we attracting the talent, what are we doing in terms of that, in that space? How are we making it so that every individual with different types of ability have access to that? So there are certain small things that we can think of in terms of, let's say, when you're creating a digital content for colors, right? People who are blind, can we look at certain standards? Can we look at certain things? Just small things that makes a huge difference. And the way we can do this is to be sure that on every single team that you have individuals that have different abilities contribute to those solutioning of those products that go out into the market for the consumers to utilize. And so when you look at Microsoft, right? Microsoft, small simple thing that they'll put in is a captioning currently to make it more accessible. Now, but going above and beyond that captioning stage, what's next that's needed is something that we should start thinking about.
Thank you for sharing that. Nish, building on that, I'm curious, what do you feel like the market has at least done a good job?
Some of the tools, technology companies like SAP and Microsoft, they have been paying attention to some of the innovative solutions to make the technology accessible. But once the technology and those standards are established, the next area where which we really need help or work is implementation of the technology. And that comes with the expertise, available knowledge, and of course, a little bit of going beyond just the standard best practices of how we test our software, how we test our websites, how we test our solutions. Also, another area which is I have seen some traction is in the special needs education. We all know the technology can bring in efficiency, can bring in scalability, but how do we leverage this in terms of making the education accessible, making the education, I call this more synchronized, holistic way of delivering the content. For example, when we talk about child on the spectrum, someone neurodivergent, there is a whole society, there is a whole community working to help that person on the spectrum. But one of the challenge which we have seen in the special needs classroom, in fact, that's how we started our journey in 2007, where coordination between parents and special needs special ed teachers, because some of those challenges can really impact this whole learning process for a child on the spectrum. So that needs a lot of work. We build a technology platform called Colors Kit, where we are teaching or leveraging the evidence-based intervention method and kind of replicating the same learning experience what they do in the classroom and expanding that to homes. How do we leverage the passion and the expertise or knowledge of parents, and then build that into that whole learning ecosystem for special needs children. So there are some great activities happening, but I think we have a long way to go when it comes to leveraging technology for the special needs classroom.
Thank you for highlighting that and the difference of what it means to build the technology, but it doesn't make sense if the society is not using it well enough. And Hetal, bring us back to specifically, I know Rangam and especially the two of you study this in two lenses, at least one in the workplace. Also, Nish, as you kind of already hinted a little bit, and even going back even younger in the youth stage. But Hetal, bring us in the workplace, at least to start on that. What are some of the stigmas as a result that is preventing that equal accessibility despite some of these tech tools that's trying? And what are, as a result, maybe technology could help play a more proactive role to support, or things that other people in general should know? Kind of a giant question, so asking your advice.
So there's a couple of things. I think creating an inclusive workplace is critically important because you really want people to be able to feel comfortable, for them to be able to self-disclose. That's number one. Most often time there's a myth around self-disclosing. People don't often want to let employers know about they consider that as a weakness that they may lose their jobs, right? But in fact, if we can turn that around, and if employers can create an environment where individuals can feel comfortable enough to be able to share and say, hey, I might just need my desk to be moved into a space where I can have some thinking time. Or when people come to me with some spontaneous answers, and they put me on the spot, I don't feel comfortable. I wish they would just be able to share that with me a little bit ahead of time. Just small things where if technology can provide some ability to be able to share that insights, where the individuals can be able to then share what are some of their areas of challenges in the workplace, which can just accelerate their growth and performance by just being able to be mindful about some of those tweaks. And in today's world, calendaring capabilities, there are certain capabilities. All it does, it takes for us to be able to put some simple steps in our process. I talked about earlier, in the recruiting and attraction, but it also applies to employee engagement during their assignment and ongoing when they're on the job. These are some of the things that I think becomes really critically important, where people then can feel comfortable to be able to self-disclose. So that's one area. There's many areas that I know that we can dive into. But that's the first and foremost, I think, that it's current challenge, where people feel not only will they lose a job, but on the other side, hiring piece is something that I'll say, hiring managers often feel that, hey, is this going to take a lot of work from my end if I hire someone? So there are certain questions that are unanswered for people when they're engaging, right? Because they're just not used to, they don't see enough examples. But programs where you create inclusive culture and people come forward, and there's, like Nish said, community gets built, then more and more awareness happens, and then more and more adoption happens.
More awareness and more adoption. Thank you for highlighting that, and how it is absolutely important, again, to think about the whole experience and not just the tech that is being built, how the tech is going to be used and incorporated. Nish, tell me a little bit more. What are some examples of things that you guys are working at Rangam, and why those are things that you are addressing some of these aspects?
Yeah, so when it comes to disability inclusion, one of the things which we have learned, it has a little bit of, I would say, additional activities needed because our hiring processes and systems are not built and doesn't have those accommodations and that extra consideration as part of our traditional system. So when we jumpstart this program or this initiatives, it needs a little bit of nurturing, lot of coordination, lot of collaboration with lot of stakeholders, right? So all this lot of comes with cost, additional cost. And that's where we have started exploring how can we build a technology platform where we are able to now not only connect all the stakeholders, but really transform all these manual processes, which is helping us two ways. One is these manual processes, we are formalizing it. We are collecting data from all these processes. And also we are helping everyone understand and learn that why some of these processes are needed, leveraging technology. So we are kind of, you know, bringing in efficiency. Now, other second piece when it comes to disability inclusion programs, one of the challenge companies are facing is scaling up, right? How do we having one or two or five or 10 people hiring in few locations? That's great initiatives. But when we are adding almost 50,000 plus adults on the spectrum every year, this few hires, few hundred hires are not going to make a dent. So how do we build and customize these systems? And we don't have to start from just to customize this, just add some extra consideration. By doing that, if we can seamlessly integrate this strategy into existing hiring strategy and then build the technology around that. For example, we are working on one of the AI, we have a couple of artificial intelligence and machine learning based technology which we are working with Dr. Fung from Stanford University and through several collaborations. And where the goal is, how do we identify more jobs? How do we empower hiring managers? Because one of the very common question companies are asking that, how do I start? Where do I start? So some of those intelligence, if we can put that in their hands, that will really make this program scalable.
Thank you for sharing that again, how it's so intentional that really, really makes a difference. I'm curious then from the macro lens, are there questions that whether somebody is building a new product or technology should keep in mind? Going back to both of you emphasizing how it's so important that we think about this, not just at the end, but from the very beginning. So what are questions, especially for product designers, those who are technologists building these products, to try to really be inclusive for all?
You're absolutely right, Monica. They have to think about that for many reasons, right? We overlook the concept of the consumer market that exists today. And Nish shared the statistic, right? With 1 in 4 people have either visible or invisible disability. So essentially what you're really doing is, if you're not considering all aspects of various disabilities into your product and not really thinking about how can we be sure that they will be able to use the product or have access to it, you're essentially removing 25% or more of the consumer market that you can essentially have as part of your customer base. Addition to that, one of the things that I was thinking about as Nish was speaking was, in today's world, it's becoming even more equally important as we talk about being customer centric, right? Where we need to think about what are the needs of the customers and how do I get to that customer quicker and faster. So with that, it all ties into when you're building the product. It becomes equally important to be sure that when you're looking at all diversity from intersectionality and ethnicity and race and gender, that we include disability, which is something we feel that in the industry, it's overlooked.
And so I'm seeing that really the question is, how do we make sure disability is one of the core components in your product development design? How does that relate to your customers? And really keeping in mind that if you're really making this accessible for all, why are you missing out the key component of an audience who is going to use and can use more? Nish, I'm curious, as we circle back on the macro lens, what are you looking forward to? And if there's anything else that you want to emphasize?
Yeah, I think that human-centric design, right? Innovation for people is one of the Luma Institute's a framework which we have been following without studying that. This is in 2007, right? Be a part of that ecosystem in order to innovate, right? And second piece is make people with disability a part of your design team. These are the two huge components which we are truly believe and we have been following for last 14 years as we have developed the product to teach children with autism, to do the assessment and ultimate intervention, screening of autism. So every part of our development efforts. In fact, at Rangam, our goal, Hetal and I, we have set up the goal that our part of the technology team of Sourceable will have about 60% of the workforce will be neurodivergent and people with other visible or invisible disability. We want to make sure that we get them a core part of the team because that's the best learning. That's the best and very valuable, I think, a strategy when we are building any product for people with disability.
Make sure they are part of your product designer team. Thank you, Nish, for reminding us on that. Hetal, any other final wisdom you want to impart as well?
No, thank you so much, Monica, for giving us this platform and not be able to speak and share our insights and knowledge and be able to help make a difference as it relates to creating more awareness, but more or less have a socioeconomic impact. Because the more we empower all areas of diversity, the better the world will be.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Nish, Hetal, for working on this, what you do, and for many years, and empowering and continues to share how others can do that as well. We're so glad you are here, but going to be at the event as well. And so look forward to seeing you there.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Same here.
Very
Thank you.
excited.
Bye-bye.